On January 12, 2007, the body of a woman was discovered in the Rambouillet forest, located west of Paris. It was headless, with arms gnawed off by wild boars, and a gaping wound in the chest suggesting the heart was missing. The body was in a state of decomposition. The woman was lying on her back along a fallen tree trunk, as if someone had left her there hoping that wild animals would reach her before the police. However, she was found by a passerby shortly before noon. He ventured a bit deeper into the forest and, about 15-20 meters from the roadside, made this gruesome discovery, which he quickly reported to the police. The main question was whether the woman had suffered an accident and then been scavenged by wild boars, or if she had been murdered. The forensic expert who arrived at the scene made a preliminary conclusion that it could not have been an accident, and the woman had likely fallen victim to a homicide. Most probably, she had died 6 weeks earlier. Although this was only a preliminary assessment, the difficulty of working in a forest or open-air setting lies in the exposure of the body to rain, snow, wind, and attacks by animals and insects. The only reliable way to establish a more accurate time of death was through entomology, specifically the study of larvae and insects on the victim's body. Consequently, the forensic expert transported the body to the forensic medicine department, while the gendarmes began investigating the crime scene in a spiral pattern, starting from the location where the body was found and moving outwards. During the investigation, the gendarmes found a bra, a wig, a black evening dress, and a robe. Cadaver dogs, specially trained to search for human remains, were also brought in, but they were unable to locate the victim's head. The forensic expert conducted the autopsy on January 15, 2007. The deceased was identified as a woman around 60 years old, of average build. A large wound on her chest indicated that some organs were missing. Indeed, the heart was not in place. The pathologist was unable to formally determine the cause of death. The woman could have died either as a result of decapitation or from the chest wound. The killer had severed her head with a sharp instrument while the heart was still beating or immediately after her death. The first thought that comes to mind is that the perpetrator removed the head and hands to make it impossible to identify the victim. A DNA sample was taken from the woman and sent to the National Genetic Fingerprint Registry, which contains all DNA samples on record. The identification of the victim happened remarkably quickly, despite what might have been expected. After all, the deceased had neither a head nor hands, which meant that there was no way to take fingerprints, identify her through dental records, or make a facial reconstruction. Nevertheless, within just 5 days, her name was established. The gendarmes considered individuals who had gone missing several months earlier. Distinctive features such as an average build, a recent scar near the gallbladder, and the approximate height and weight of the woman, accounting for the missing organs, suggested that she might be a woman who had disappeared in the fall of the previous year. A DNA comparison confirmed this assumption. The decapitated body belonged to Nicole Suard. On November 10, 2006, it was a holiday, and someone decided to celebrate it at a dance evening. The event was supposed to take place at Nicole Suard's Argentine tango school. However, for some reason, the host of the evening was not there to greet the guests. People gradually gathered and began to wonder, where is Nicole? The woman had not informed anyone that she would be late, which was completely unlike her. Friends and students called her mobile and home numbers several times, but without success. Nicole's daughter tried to reach her over the next few days, but the more time passed, the clearer it became that something had happened. She then reported her mother's disappearance to the police. The detectives began their investigation into the disappearance by studying the victim's background. Nicole worked as an accountant, but after retiring, she decided to turn her passion for dancing into a profession. She resumed dance lessons, earned a diploma, and in 1996 opened a school where she taught tango. The school was successful and Nicole was considered an excellent instructor. Her friends also loved and valued her. A friend recalls that she was an extraordinary woman who gave all her friendship unreservedly, asking for nothing in return. It was enough to ask for something, and she was always happy to help. Nicole was an expressive woman with a contagious laugh, passionate about her role as a mother and grandmother. It was clear that she enjoyed life and did not suffer from depression. She was certainly not the kind of person who would simply run away at the age of 62. The police's theory that Nicole did not run away on her own was confirmed fairly quickly. Forensic experts discovered stains on the white-tiled floor of her garage, which she had converted into a dance studio. These were drops of blood, Nicole's blood. However, at this stage of the investigation, the detectives still believed that Nicole might be alive and possibly kidnapped. A search was conducted in her home and on the surrounding property. Since she lived on the edge of the Montmorency forest, the gendarmes explored the nearby ponds and forest areas adjacent to her house. hoping to find any clues, but all efforts proved futile. The only lead was a romantic relationship with a man that had ended 3 months earlier, so investigators wanted to learn more about these connections. The man's name was Christian Jimenez, a 72-year-old divorce who had entered Nicole's life with a bang in 2004. Since his arrival, much had changed. They met in Paris at a dance event workshop. Christian was a fairly good dancer, and that brought them closer. Nicole spoke about him enthusiastically to friends, claiming she had found her true love. They started dating, and soon Christian Jimenez was present at all family gatherings with Nicole. He became the president of her dance school and even started teaching there. Nicole began spending more and more time with him, drifting away from her family and friends. But suddenly, their love story came to an abrupt end. In August 2006, Nicole broke up with Christian. However, this was far from the end, because Christian Jimenez was not the kind of man to simply allow a woman to end things with him so easily. He took the breakup very badly and looked for every opportunity to see Nicole. His pursuit of his former lover seemed suspicious to the gendarmes, and 8 days after the woman's disappearance, on November 18th, they decided to speak with him. Christian Jimenez arrived at the police station carrying a bag. Although he and Nicole had broken up, he still had keys to her house, mailbox, and garage, where bloodstains belonging to the victim had been found. It seemed like his way of signaling to the police that he had nothing to hide. In addition, a knife was found in his bag, which the police confiscated. Interestingly, on the same day, November 18th, shortly before noon, investigators learned that the victim's car had been found burned in a town where Christian Jimenez also lived. They informed Christian that his former lover's vehicle had been discovered approximately 800 meters from his house. In response, the man suddenly jumped up and exclaimed that they burned the car near his house. However, the investigator hadn't mentioned the condition in which the vehicle was found. Christian revealed his own guilt, as only the police and the arsonist knew that Nicole's car had been set on fire. The car was located on the banks of the Seine River in the commune of Attesmont, prompting divers to search the river for any evidence that might help locate Nicole. At the same time, detectives found that on the day of Nicole's disappearance, Christian had been in the municipality of Daumont, where Nicole lived. This was confirmed through the pinging of his phone. His route on the day of the woman's disappearance looked extremely suspicious. He traveled from the municipality of Daumont, where Nicole resided, to Attesmont, back to his own home, and then to the Rambouillet forest, where the body was found. Thus, investigators had evidence contradicting Christian Jimenez's statements. The man was arrested, and while he had been willing to cooperate with detectives before, he now became withdrawn and silent. When the gendarmes arrived at his home with a search warrant, they were struck by how bright, cozy, and warm Nicole's house was, in contrast to Christian's. His home was physically uncomfortable to be in. It wasn't dirty, but the windows were painted over, casting a shadowy gloom inside, as if the man sought complete isolation. In addition to that, he had a collection of animal paws preserved in formaldehyde, a liquid used for taxidermy. It was a peculiar collection. It's unlikely there is another collector in the world with something similar. Christian later explained that he started gathering this collection for an exhibition, but it was still a very strange choice. All of this added new details to an already grim portrait, something detectives would later confirm by speaking with his children and ex-wife. During the search, the officers discovered a receipt for 98-octane fuel. This was curious because the man's car runs on diesel fuel, while Nicole's car uses gasoline. The investigators contacted the gas station and obtained footage from surveillance cameras on the evening of Nicole's disappearance. The video clearly showed Christian appearing at 11:30 p.m., driving the victim's car. He pulled up to the pump, filled the tank with fuel, and also filled a canister, totaling 15 liters. He then drove off, paying with his own bank card. This evidence allowed the detectives to establish a clear link between him and the disappearance of his former lover. In addition to this, a drop of blood belonging to Nicole was found on his jeans, which became the final piece of evidence that allowed them to charge him with the kidnapping of Nicole. At that point, investigators still did not know where the woman was or whether she was alive. However, they were confident that Christian had knowledge of this. Christian held the key to this mystery. In light of the new evidence, they were eager to hear the man's explanations, especially since he had previously insisted that he knew nothing about the case. So Christian has to explain the evidence collected by the police while managing to get away unscathed. He told a completely incredible story. According to him, unknown individuals in black clothing, hoods, and masks are responsible for Nicole's disappearance. Detectives had repeatedly heard stories about mysterious strangers in black from suspects who, trying to get out of trouble at all costs, denied the obvious. Christian claimed that Nicole's disappearance was beneficial to third parties. It was a fantastic statement, but the investigators decided to listen to how the man would present the story. Christian began by saying that on the afternoon of November 10, 2006, he arrived at the shopping center that Nicole always visited, hoping to see her. However, he dozed off while sitting in his car. He woke up in the evening, still in the same parking lot. He did not see Nicole, but an unknown person approached him. An unknown person in black clothing and a hood frightened Christian and got into his car. He ordered him to drive to Nicole's house, and Christian complied. In the rearview mirror, he noticed that 2 other people were following them in another car. Thus began a long journey lasting more than 3 hours from Nicole's house to Christian's home. Along the way, the kidnapper ordered Christian to refuel and fill a canister with gasoline. At this point, the unknown man got out of the car just before entering the gas station. As investigators later established, no witnesses saw people in black clothing and hoods. Christian was the only one captured by the surveillance camera. Nonetheless, Christian continued his story, claiming that he saw 2 kidnappers carrying something long wrapped in a blanket and concluded that it could have been Nicole's body. When both cars arrived at his house, the kidnappers handed him a bundle of Nicole's keys and told him to go home and keep quiet. That's why he didn't tell the police anything from the very beginning. When the officers asked Christian who he thought these people were, he replied that they were probably the Argentine Tango Mafia, or possibly Jehovah's Witnesses. He was convinced that such a mafia existed because Nicole had a friend, a tango teacher, who had also been attacked. However, despite claiming to be frightened, this did not prevent him from rushing to his hairdresser immediately after the kidnapping. When investigators asked him about this, he responded that this visit had been planned. Indeed, how could he not go? The detectives laughed at the scenario presented by the suspect. They decided that he must have seen this in some movie, but his story did not match the collected evidence. There was neither a beginning nor any proof in this version, and he couldn't provide a description of the kidnappers. At the same time, the investigators had a mass of evidence. The victim's car that he drove, blood on his jeans, a knife seized from him, which had the victim's DNA on the blade, and keys to Nicole's house found in his bag. There was sufficient evidence, yet Christian still insisted on his innocence. A psychiatrist who examined the man stated that he suffered from paranoia. Therefore, he might truly believe that what happened to him was real. To learn more, the investigators closely examined Christian's life, and they found many surprises. Allegedly a retired engineer and a veteran of military operations with many high-ranking friends. He was actually a lonely old man with a dark past. If you met him on the street, you would smile at him warmly because he looked like an ordinary retiree. Well-groomed, with neat mustaches and a classic shirt, he liked to present himself well and appeared to be in excellent physical shape. However, to present himself in a certain light, Christian Jimenez did not shy away from lying. Unfortunately, Nicole believed him. She was charmed by a man who was always around and who had an answer to all her questions. Gradually, he gained access to all her accounts and took control of her school. Christian assured Nicole that he knew better how to run the school, and students who came to learn from her began to leave, realizing that she could no longer do anything on her own, that she had lost her voice. Christian stifled her with his demands. Moreover, he isolated her from everyone, family, friends, students, so that she belonged only to him, completely controlling her life. But unexpectedly, something made her wake up and break off with Christian. For someone like Christian, suffering from paranoia, this was unbearable. He began to stalk Nicole everywhere, and then he killed her. When Nicole's body was discovered in January 2007, Christian had already been under arrest for nearly 2 months, accused of her kidnapping. But this did not affect his version of events one bit. The trial of Christian began on June 16, 2008. The victim's family hoped to learn the whole truth about how Nicole died, but Christian said nothing. He continued to insist on his version that he was also a victim of kidnappers, the Argentine Tango Mafia, who had dealt with Nicole and burned her car 800 meters from his house to frame him. However, several witnesses took the stand, and their testimonies made a monumental impact. First of all, Christian's own daughter testified about how terribly he treated his daughters and their mother. When she was 7 years old, she was subjected to harassment by her own father. He did the same with her sister, his second daughter, when she was 10 years old. But that wasn't all. Nicole's daughter testified that her 4-year-old daughter, Nicole's granddaughter, had been subjected to even worse harassment by the man. On the very day of Nicole's disappearance, she was supposed to testify to the police regarding her little granddaughter. She had received a summons in the mail, and Christian, who had the key to Nicole's mailbox, probably learned about it. Later, the investigator informed Nicole that she did not need to come on the 10th, but not knowing this, Christian might have decided to go through with his plans. He was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole in 20 years. But he did not stop there and filed an appeal. On June 29, 2009, the appeals process began in Versailles. By this time, the defendant had studied his case from A to Z and practically defended himself. The family addressed Christian directly, which is usually not done in court. The atmosphere was very heavy. The family could no longer bear it. The uncertainty had lasted too long. But once again, they heard nothing from him. The court did not need much time to reach its verdict. At the end of the appeals process, Christian was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole in 22 years. A year later, he was sentenced to an additional 4 years for what he had done to his daughter when she was little. Many mysteries still remain regarding the tragic end of Nicole. Where was she killed? Why were a wig and clothing found near the body? Where did Christian hide the head of his victim? Investigators and psychologists believe that he took the head with him as a fetish, wanting to keep a part of her, as if saying, "Now you will always belong to me." Acknowledging the obvious facts would inevitably require him to reveal where the head is located. Christian tried to control every woman in his life. After his divorce from his wife and before meeting Nicole, he dated another woman who was very ill. Christian did not allow her to listen to her doctor's advice and forced her to undergo treatment according to his directives. Perhaps the roots of his behavior go back to his childhood when he lived with an authoritarian mother, and adult responsibilities were placed on him at a young age. However, a difficult childhood in no way justifies the man's behavior. The fact that he ruined the lives of at least 3 underage girls and took the life of a woman who simply wanted to give him a happy life in a family hearth cannot be excused.